as is always the case, as generations get older, as the workforce gets older, and then a new breed of talent comes into the workplace, we see articles flood the market or flood the airwaves, talking about how to manage the next generation of employees, and you get the sense that it's always, oh, you know what, the younger generation doesn't do things the way we did it, and that's, it's cyclical. It's something that you see every 5-10 years or so. That's something that I think is human nature, and it isn't going to change. But as I mentioned, what typically happens as you kind of see the changing of the guard is the older generation will start to flood the media with articles and media around how to manage the next generation. And so this is an article in Business Insider, 4 tips on managing workers in their 20s as Gen Z employees enter the workforce in growing numbers. And with any of these kinds of articles and any of these guides, there's always merit to how they approach managing the next generation. And there's always value in understanding the tactics and kind of jumping on different bandwagons to make sure that you're relevant, right? Every organization from a talent management standpoint needs to be relevant to make sure that it can continue on. The 4 tactics that this article mentions are to give Gen Z a voice. This is a generation that's very used to sharing their opinions online and sharing their opinions on social media. So that, of course, will probably bleed into a workplace situation to where they're gonna have ideas, as most people do, as most young people do, and they're gonna want to share them. So tactically, it's a good idea to give Gen Z a voice. Ditch formality, which is an interesting one. It kind of points to just the changing nature of what the demands are around work. But I'll posit that there are industries that works in, and then there's still industries where, as a customer, you're going to want to look to the other side of the table and see someone who's a little bit more formal because it's important to you. So that one is definitely, it's trendy. I get it, but also one that maybe you need to take with a pinch of salt. The third is give praise. That's another one that I think is trendy, and is a shifting management style that you're seeing with kind of the younger generation, where that positive reinforcement is important. So that's one that's definitely probably it's relevant. Whether it's a long-term play in terms of a trend, we'll see. And then 4th is create an open mental health culture. And that's one that, of course, is important. We're dealing with human beings, and we're all human beings in the workforce. And to deal with each other as human beings, I think, requires addressing people where they are. And so that's one that not only is trendy in terms of the relevance of mental health today, but is a good tactic to managing a workforce, regardless of age. But the point of this episode isn't to assess the 4 tactics that are addressed in this article, but to really raise the conversation or elevate the thinking around management. And what I think is that management fundamentally doesn't change over time. Tactics change for sure, and we mentioned that earlier with relevance, and you've got to make sure that your management style not only is true to yourself as a manager, but also relevant to the social times. But so we discussed 4 tactics there that are based on this article, but what I'll put on the table here are 4 strategies or 4 even higher level ways of thinking that should inform then tactics later. Tactics will become easy when you manage with these 4 things in mind. And with these 4 things, you don't really need to think about trends or managing the younger workforce. These are fundamental ways to manage other human beings as a leader that I think will stand the test of time. And the first is listening. It's so important as management to understand the sentiment and the culture that happens in an organization when management isn't looking, so to speak. And so you do that by trying to get as much feedback back as you can from as many people as you can. But listening then informs, or having a culture of listening at the management level informs, if we want to talk tactics, giving Gen Z a voice, for example. So making sure that you've got a culture built into your organization where you appreciate people who are able to listen and take feedback, that I think drives a lot of good management habits going forward. Understanding your EVP is the second management fundamental, I'd say. And that really goes down to protecting your organization from what can be very quickly shifting dynamics at the tactical level. Social issues will arise all the time that will force your organization to respond or address. But if you understand at a fundamental level what your employer value proposition is, what you bring to the table as an employer, what you want to stand as, so what kind of a torch you want to send into the sky that defines your organization, you then have a North Star which you don't shift away from fundamentally. Like, again, tactics can change, but who you are as an employer and what you stand for shouldn't change over time. And if you manage against those fundamentals, or if you manage against those mission or values, then I think understanding the tactics that are relevant long term will be easier. The third is to strive for excellence, and I think this one helps with ensuring that you create a culture of opportunity. If everybody at the organization is striving for excellence, and you drive that as a fundamental management value, what you're able to do is then open up revenue streams or different opportunities that expand the org chart. And when you have opportunities to grow, you then are able to attract the level of talent that you need to grow, for one, but also it keeps retention at a level where you can benchmark against the industry at a positive level. So the third is to strive for excellence, and then the fourth is to treat people with empathy. I put this one last because I think it's maybe the most important lesson, and the best leaders that I've encountered do this, where they see every single individual in an organization as a human being. This then drives back to the tactics we talked about earlier around mental health and giving praise and things like that. But those are they're the byproduct of a cultural approach, which is to treat people with empathy and treat people as human beings who have lives outside of work. And we as leaders, as managers, it's important to treat the entire person. I understand that we want to drive kind of cultures where we work when we're at work, and then we leave work at work when we go home. But the reality is that most people, if they're having a bad day at home, they're gonna be upset or they're gonna have an altered mood when they're in the office. So we just have to deal as managers with individuals as a whole. And if we can treat everybody with empathy, and we have a culture of listening, we understand who we are as an organization from an employer value proposition standpoint, and then we're striving for excellence, I think you have a framework there with which the tactics become quite easy to know exactly what to do. That we no longer do you need to read articles to where you learn how to manage the next generation. It becomes pretty clear once you understand those four strategic ideas.